On this Saturday night, breaking news and bad news for the Toronto Blue Jays. Ottawa says no to their plan for home games. What a strikeout means for Canada's Major League Baseball team. Indoor bars open in parts of Ontario, but doctors say drinking and distancing don't mix well. Remembering a civil rights icon.
When you see something that is not right, not just, not fair, you have a moral obligation to say something.
From Selma, Alabama to Black Lives Matter, how John Lewis inspired a generation. Plus,
it was like a contract. You've actually signed something that says you can't sell to non-white.
Reckoning with a racist legacy in real estate. And the stormy start to summer for weather-weary Albertans.
Global National with Robin Gill. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Well, Canada's Major League Baseball team, the Toronto Blue Jays, was hit hard today. The federal government rejected a pitch for the Jays to play at home in the midst of COVID-19, despite a proposed baseball bubble to keep players safe. The strikeout, according to Ottawa, is based on the advice of public health officials. Let's bring in our Erica Vella, who is in Toronto. Erica, what led to this decision?
Well, Farah, the final decision rested with the federal government, and it is saying no to having the Blue Jays play games here in Toronto. Now, earlier this week, we saw officials at both the city and provincial level supporting the idea of having the team play at the Rogers Centre. Now, right now, anyone entering Canada for non-essential reasons is required to self-isolate for 14 days. And Major League Baseball needed an exemption to this rule for the team to play here. Now, the Jays are in Toronto for training camp, but when the season begins next week, both the Jays and their opponents would be traveling back and forth between Canada and the U.S., where transmission remains high.
And I understand that professional sports are very important. I'm a lifelong Jays fan. I was born in Toronto. I was at the Sky Dome, as it was then known, in 1992 when we first won. I remember the bat flip by Jose Bautista. These are really, really important milestones, but they can't drive important decisions when it comes to our border and when it comes to the health and safety of Canadians. We have to look at the evidence. We have to look at the advice that we're getting.
Now, the Blue Jays president and CEO says he supports or he takes on the federal government's decision. And at this point, he says he's now focused on looking towards the future. And his focus is finding a home field for the 2020 season.
Dunedin is the only one that is 100% seamless right now and ready to go. That, from a player health standpoint, has some challenges. Buffalo is certainly one that we spent a lot, increasing amount of time in the past few weeks. But we continue to, that is not done. And there are some infrastructure and player facility challenges that we would have to address to get that up to Major League standards.
The federal government rejecting the plan, even though the provincial government was comfortable with it. Now, Erica, the Ontario government is being criticized for part of its Phase 3 rollout as well.
That's right, Farah. This is the first weekend gyms, restaurants and bars are buzzing as large portions of Ontario enter into Phase 3. But the association representing doctors in the province is urging the government to rethink part of that plan.
I came here, I got here at about 5:45. I jumped out, I'm ready to go.
First in line for his first workout at this gym in Peterborough, Ontario. It's something he's waited for 4 months.
It's been a long wait. So hopefully all the gyms throughout the GTA start opening up.
For now, Ontario is taking a regional approach in reopening. Only certain parts of the province have been given the green light to move on to Stage 3, and that doesn't include Toronto. It means larger gatherings are now permitted, a maximum of 50 people when indoors and 100 people when outdoors. Restaurants can go back to serving people inside.
It was very exciting.
On Friday, this restaurant in Waterloo opened its dining room to the public.
The chance to kind of have people inside again and have more tables and have that opportunity again was really, really positive.
On the same day, the Ontario Medical Association issued an open letter to the provincial government warning of the risks of reopening bars.
We've seen an incidence and an uptick in the incidence as soon as bars open, and we've seen outbreaks, local outbreaks associated with bars.
This after at least 45 COVID-19 cases were linked to several bars in Montreal.
And so we're saying that we're not sure the benefit of opening bars outweighs the risks just yet.
This restaurant manager says he understands the concern. He says staff are working to keep guests safe.
That becomes our job, to make sure that there's enough people in there to police those policies. And again, you know, we do have to lean a little bit on our guests to say, This is for your safety.
At Kentucky Bourbon and Barbecue, even with the ability to dine indoors,
at the end of the day, it is still patio season. You know, people, I think, generally still prefer to sit outside.
But Glasgow says having the ability to offer indoor dining for the summer allows staff to prepare for the fall.
When patio season does end, we can kind of use it as like a pilot situation right now to make sure that we have all these measures in place.
Erica Vella, Global News, Toronto.
Another developing story tonight. There are reports multiple people are injured and there are possible casualties after a bus rollover in Alberta between Jasper and Banff National Parks. The rollover happened late today in an area of the Columbia ice fields on Highway 93, a popular place for tourists. 3 helicopters have been dispatched to the scene as the emergency unfolds. Police are asking people to avoid the area. So many Canadians are on the move this weekend, trying to make the most of summer. But there are concerns complacency could cause an uptick of COVID-19. There are more than 109,000 cases in Canada. And from east to west, provinces are warning everyone to stay safe. In Quebec today, which just began a 2-week construction holiday, people over 12 years old must now wear face masks inside public places. The federal government says it is ordering more than 75 million syringes, alcohol swabs, and bandages to help treat Canadians as soon as a vaccine is approved. In India, where coronavirus cases have passed 1 million, 3 generations of Bollywood's most famous family are in hospital with COVID-19. Aishwarya Rai Bachchan and her 8-year-old daughter have been admitted to Mumbai's top private hospital. Her husband and iconic father-in-law Amitabh Bachchan were hospitalized earlier this week. The 46-year-old actress had been isolating at home since testing positive on Sunday. People around the world paused today to remember South Africa's first black president, Nelson Mandela, and his legacy fighting for equal rights. But as the world marked Mandela Day, South Africa still suffers inequality, like a collapsing public health system. Tonight, there are fears COVID-19 will make the situation in South Africa even worse, where already 350,000 people have been infected. Health officials say the country is on a similar pandemic path as the U.S., Brazil, India, and Russia, and could soon become one of the hardest hit countries. And on the day Nelson Mandela is remembered for his fearless advocacy, the world mourns an American civil rights hero who helped change history. Longtime Georgia Congressman John Lewis lost his battle with cancer at the age of 80. Lewis served for 33 years in Congress and was fighting for equal rights long before that. Jennifer Johnson reports on his legacy and guiding light for future generations.
Congressman John Lewis was a man of dedication, a champion for his country and the fight for civil rights. The son of Alabama sharecroppers, Lewis believed peaceful protests could change history.
We can change America, and in changing America, we can change the world.
Arrested more than 40 times, often beaten, Lewis was one of the leaders of the nonviolent protest movement against laws in the South that segregated white and black Americans in schools, buses, even drinking fountains. In 1963, Lewis was the youngest speaker at the March on Washington. But it was this 1965 march that started in Selma, Alabama, heading to Montgomery, the state's capital, that made Lewis famous.
When we were marching across that bridge, just simple saying people wanted to register to vote.
They got as far as the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma.
Turn around and disperse.
and they came toward us, beating us with nightsticks, using tear gas and trampling us with horses.
That day is known as Bloody Sunday. Lewis was left with a fractured skull. The images of police brutality ignited a nation. 5 months later, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law.
I'm John Lewis, running for Congress.
Lewis kept fighting against racial injustice in Washington. Elected in 1986, he became one of the country's leading liberal Democrats, never backing down from a fight, from health care to gun control to the impeachment of U.S. President Donald Trump.
When you see something that is not right, not just, not fair, you have a moral obligation to say something, to do something.
Despite battles between Lewis and the president, flags have been lowered to half-mast at the White House. Tributes have poured in from former presidents and current politicians as Americans mourn this loss. In 2011, President Barack Obama awarded Lewis the Presidential Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor.
When parents teach their children what is meant by courage, the story of John Lewis will come to mind.
Lewis became a published author and won the National Book Award in 2016, an emotional tribute for a man denied a library card as a child.
And we were told that the library was for whites only and not for colors. And to come here and receive this award, this honor with this, it's too much.
Just weeks before his death, Lewis summoned the strength to visit the Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington. He was surrounded by activists in awe of his courage and strength.
It's very moving.
5 years ago, almost to the day, Lewis tweeted one of his mugshots with the caption, "Even though I was arrested, I smiled because I was on the right side of history. Find a way to get in the way." Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Calls for racial justice and an end to systemic racism remain strong in the aftermath of George Floyd's killing. Today, demonstrators in Toronto rallied to defund the city's police service and took aim at some historic monuments. 3 people were arrested after protesters tossed paint on statues of Canada's first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, a statue of King Edward VII outside the Ontario Legislature, and on the monument to Egerton Ryerson on the Ryerson University campus. Members of the Toronto chapter of Black Lives Matter said the statues perpetuate the history of colonialism and anti-Black violence. Oregon's governor says President Donald Trump's deployment of federal agents patrolling the streets of Portland and arresting protesters is a blatant abuse of power. The unidentified and camouflage-clad authorities have been seen over several nights rounding up protesters and taking them away in unmarked vehicles. The Trump administration ordered the troops to protect federal buildings where demonstrators have been rallying for more than 50 nights. The U.S. Attorney for Oregon is calling for an investigation, saying the use of militarized forces on the city streets is reflective of tactics of a dictator. Coming up on Global National, 5G for freedom. I asked Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister whether the release of the 2 Michaels could be leveraged with a Huawei deal. This week, Britain became the latest Western nation to formally restrict the Chinese telecom giant Huawei from its 5G network, which means Canada is now the only nation in the so-called Five Eyes intelligence sharing alliance to not have some kind of formal ban or restriction on Huawei. This comes as we near 600 days of imprisonment for 2 Canadians in China. Ottawa says Michael Spavor and Michael Kofrick are being arbitrarily held as pawns in retaliation for the arrest of Huawei Chief Financial Officer Meng Wanzhou on a U.S. extradition request. In an interview airing Sunday on the West Block, I asked Canada's Foreign Minister François-Philippe Champagne whether he thinks the decision on whether to allow Huawei to operate in Canada could be used as a bargaining chip to secure the freedom of the 2 Michaels. He insists that's simply not the case.
I would not make any link with the 2 issues. One is to ensure the security of our network and our national security in general. I think Canadians want us to make the right decision, to be thoughtful in our analysis, to consult with the intelligence agency, to make sure we protect our system, our communication system for now and for decades to come. I would not make any link between the two.
I'll also ask the foreign minister about recent reports that Russian hackers may be trying to steal sensitive information about coronavirus vaccine trials here. Plus, with September just around the corner, many parents are concerned about what school is going to look like in the fall. What are other countries doing, and are we behind? I'll speak with two leading voices on how to safely reopen schools. That's all coming up tomorrow on the West Block, when I'll be sitting in for Mercedes Stevenson. Null and void, but not forgotten. Next, why one BC politician is digging up real estate's racist past. Flames burst from this cathedral in France for hours in the western city of Nantes. It took over 100 firefighters to control the blaze, which blew stained glass windows and destroyed the grand organ. Officials suspect arson and say 3 fires had been started at the 15th century site. A politician in British Columbia is calling on his municipality to erase a racist covenant that prevents people from selling their homes to non-white buyers. It was a shocking discovery for Marcus Wong when he bought his house in West Vancouver. And as Robin Gill reports, there are other neighborhoods in Canada that until recently had the same racism when it comes to real estate.
The British Properties is a posh neighborhood in West Vancouver, a suburb of Vancouver. This is where Marcus Wong grew up.
Well, I certainly remember the times when, going around in the community, people reminding me sort of subtly, this is why the British Properties are called the British Properties.
Then Wong bought a house, and there it was in writing, why he felt so unwelcome. The covenant in the land title that says, no person of the African or Asiatic race or African or Asiatic descent, except servants of the occupier of the premises in residence, shall reside or be allowed to remain on the premises.
The language is very striking. It's very shocking, in fact.
Wong is now a councillor for West Vancouver and has introduced a motion to have this redacted, even though it is technically null and void in Canada. This part of the country isn't the only neighborhood with real estate rules that promote racial segregation. In 1920, an equally troubling covenant was enacted in the neighborhood of Victoria Park, now part of Calgary's Stampede grounds. Residents who lived in the Broadview and O'Connor area of Toronto weren't allowed to sell to Jews or persons of objectionable nationality. It was deemed illegal in 1945. And it wasn't until 2019 that the same anti-Semitic sentiment was removed from the books in the city of Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu near Montreal.
It was like a contract. You've actually signed something that says you can't sell to non-white. If you do, someone can actually take you to court, and the courts will find against you.
Yeah, and they did.
And they did.
Historian Henry Yu has studied racism in real estate as far back as the beginning of colonialism in Canada. But he doesn't think these covenants should actually be erased, since they're already null and void.
I would really be opposed to everybody quietly changing their legal titles and, getting them updated and making it seem like that history didn't occur.
Wong is steadfast in his resolve to have the covenant erased in the place where he was born, but believes it will serve as a history lesson.
Really have that frank discussion of who do we want to be as Canadians, How does this match up or doesn't match up with our values as a nation?
West Vancouver Council votes on this motion in the fall, and while there may not be blatant outrage, there is certainly an uncomfortable feeling to know that this rule is still on the books. Robin Gill, Global News, West Vancouver.
Cruel summer, Canada's costliest hailstorm hits a province while it's down. Even before the pandemic's financial blow, Alberta was poised to suffer its worst ever economic decline, and the largest in Canada. Now the province's money woes have been worsened by Mother Nature. The costliest hailstorm in Canadian history has left Alberta in shambles this summer. And as Jenna Freeman reports, experts chalk it up to bad luck.
In June, vinyl siding stripped from homes, shattered windshields in northeast Calgary. The cost? Catastrophic. At $1.2 billion, it's the costliest hailstorm in Canadian history. Then July, in minutes, crops cut in half, more hail hammering the province of Alberta.
Well, this was a field of wheat that was up to my waist.
These photos were taken 24 hours apart. A storm near Innisfail leveling Dwayne Bennett's crop.
Massive wind and over 6 inches of hail. And we've lost 14 out of 1,600 acres probably.
Enter the hail suppression team, taking to the skies to try and mitigate some of the damage from Mother Nature. Implemented in 1996, the planes use technology to produce ice crystals intended to reduce the size of hail and in turn the damage caused by it. So far this summer, the team hasn't tracked the number of storms going up, but says that the damage that's being incurred is increasingly severe.
Our high statistics for severe storms and operations, it's increased. The conditions seem to be more severe within the last 10 years.
And expensive.
A few decades ago, insurers were paying out on average $500 million a year. That number has almost quadrupled to almost $1.9 billion a year.
This year, Alberta insurers alone are expected to dole out $2 billion. According to Environment Canada, the record-setting hailstorm that hit Calgary can simply be chalked up to bad luck. Those storms usually happen just in the foothills, not over top a city. Researchers still don't know why storms are more destructive. Those details will come with additional data and analysis. But with at least half of storm season still left, it becomes an anxious game of waiting and watching. Jenna Freeman, Global News, Calgary.
And that's Global National for this Saturday. I'm Farah Nasser. Tonight's Your Canada is the Toronto skyline. Does your community have a unique landmark you'd like to share with us? Email your pictures to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks so much for watching. Until tomorrow, take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.